Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining the 16th presentation event of BA Slash. I'm Monique Cole, currently working at a non-profit organization in Hong Kong called The Good Lab. There, I apply design thinking approach on many of the placemaking projects to design more user-friendly public space with the users. If you are new to BA Slash, a big welcome to you. I started BA Slash community at the start of the pandemic. The aim is to connect people with different expertise and insights for the evolving market needs. We also have Pam as the co-host today. Pam, would you like to introduce yourself too?
Yes, hi everybody. My name is Parminder. I kind of joined BA Slash sort of towards the end, I suppose, sort of April time. I work for a large energy provider or trader, I should say. I work for Shell, and I'm really excited about today. I've kind of known Agilicis for over sort of like 11 years, I should say. Simon, the co-founder, and I've obviously and I'd like to say I've done some training with them as well. So ABS is online, I can see, and so yeah, so this subject is going to be quite close to my heart because I do remember having these conversations with ABS, so it's quite nice to get Agilicis to come and especially Graham to come and do this talk for us. So, you know, I'm a BA, I've been in this space for about sort of 15 plus years, so kind of really looking forward to the findings and the thoughts and kind of be able to have a healthy debate about it.
Great, amazing. Thanks, Pam.
Thanks, Monique.
Right. So just a few housekeeping points here. So you will receive the slides and the recording in a few days. Bear with us. We do have some bottleneck at the moment in terms of work, like the capacity and all these, but that would get to you. And your line is muted at the moment because we are doing a recording, but feel free to unmute your line towards the end of the section at the Q&A. You can also put your questions in the chat box where Pam will be collating the questions towards the end. We always appreciate your constructive feedback. So give us your views on Mentimeter. We'll share the link straight away. So Pam will share the link. And last but not least, you're very welcome to stay behind to meet one another. I'm always kind of evaluating the direction of BA Slash. So if you like BA Slash, do spread the word with your colleagues, your contacts, tweet us, follow us on LinkedIn and on YouTube. Every post that you make, every tweet that you redo, really can make us go further. And I would love to hear from you and co-create the community that works for you, myself, and everyone as well. So do get in touch. And since the idea of BA Slash was initiated, BA Slash has never really been positioning ourselves as a community just for business analysts as a particular role, but is to bring skill sets from different principles together to support people who recognize the importance of lifelong and cross-field learning. So it's really great that Graham from Agilicis is going to share his view, and he's sharing literally the same passion as us. He really sees business analysis, the skills themselves are very important, even there isn't an official business analyst role in the world of Agile. So without further ado, I'll get Graham onto the virtual stage and we can give him some round of applause as well. Thank you, Graham.
Thank you. I'm just going to pinch your screen share. So as just a bit of a warm-up exercise, if you could all head over to menti.com and pop that code in and just pop in what you think are some of the key skills for business analysis. That'll be a good little icebreaker to kick us off. And I'll just get my windows arranged for presenting in the background.
The link's in the chat for Menti.
Thanks. And if anybody does want to keep their camera on, I like when we're doing things remotely, I try and replicate the in-person experience as much as possible, because I think it's better engagement for everybody. And it's more interesting for me if I'm not just looking at my own face. That would be very narcissistic if that was what I was doing all day long. But obviously, no pressure. Okay, got some stuff popping in here. Listening, that's a great one. Storytelling, nice, I like that. Okay, just give it another 15, 20 seconds in case anybody's still going. Cool. Awesome. Okay. So we'll come back to this in a minute. The reason for this will become apparent. And if anybody is still going in the background, don't worry. That's cool. All right. So I will switch us over to the main presentation now. And start by talking a little bit about myself. So hello, I'm Graham. I work for Agile Assist as a transformation consultant. My journey into Agile has been a bit of an interesting one. So I started as an infrastructure type person, infrastructure engineer, and then from there moved into QA and Agile as a part of that QA role. And from there, got involved in some transformations and Scrum Mastery, moved to another business and did some Scrum Master stuff there, and took on more of an Agile coach role. What happened then was quite interesting. So the business that I was working for got bought by their biggest competitor, who also bought the other 3 people in the marketplace at the same time. So overnight, we were all 5 businesses that were supposed to be fierce competitors that were all suddenly teammates and peers, which was a very, very interesting cultural dynamic to try and figure out. And that my role then became, we've got 5 different companies that all have to deliver software where there's huge amounts of overlap in the code. Nobody knows anybody. All the ways of working are different. All the processes are different. And so I spent a number of years getting everybody in lockstep to figure out how we can deliver these globally distributed, complex cybersecurity products. And how I did that is just to meet people where they are. And if anybody is going through any kind of transformation, that is the recommendation that I would give, is just meet people where they are. They're already trying their best, and then just help them along that journey. And that's what I have continued to do. So I work for Agile Assist. I won't shill Agile Assist too much, but I will say they're a great company to work for. So we do consultancy, we do training, we have teams that we stand up for people, and we have some Agile product management tools. Great client base. The reason that I like working for them is they don't take themselves too seriously, and everybody out of the business has got hands-on expertise of delivering. So we know the real world. Yes, there's the textbook version of how you do things, and then there's also here's how it actually pans out in the real world. And I think that's really, really valuable, and it keeps things interesting and engaging for me. So you might be wondering, where did this talk come from? How did it come about? We do quite a lot of transformations. That's probably, I would say, 60–70% of our business. A lot of that is safe. We do, standard Scrum, Agile, and Scrum at scale, but we do quite a lot of safe as well. So when we were approached to speak about what's the role of BAs in the sort of Agile landscape, it caused a bit of conversation internally, because the BA is not in the Scrum guide, and it's not recognized. And if you speak to some people, they will say, oh, there's no need for business analysts, or the BA role, it doesn't exist anymore. And in my experience, that's a bit of a misdirect, and it's a bit of maybe a bit of a lazy way to explain it away, because there are a couple of cases, especially in the scale setup, where having a business analyst, like the typical business analyst role, is really, really useful. But more and more, we're seeing the move towards skill-based. And that's where I want to focus a lot of our conversation today. So you have all just spent some time filling out what you think typical business analysis skills look like. And let's just have a look where we matched up. So I came up with these ones. I know facilitation was definitely on there. Organization was on there. Business was on there. Data was on there. Really interesting to see a lot of soft skills in your comments there. So by and large, I think you've hit on most of the same points that I did, and this is the conversation that I have with people on a fairly regular basis. When we go into businesses and they say, oh, is business analysis still relevant, or is it needed in the Agile world? And we've probably all worked with people who have very interesting titles like evangelist, Agile, change leader, product analyst, and you hear the title and it's not immediately clear from that what this person does on a day-to-day basis, and that's absolutely fine. The point is, it's not about what the label is, it's about the skills that person has. And when you look at this, I don't think there are any skills there that aren't useful in the Agile enterprise, regardless of what you're building or how you're building it. Nobody could look at that and say you don't need any of those things, regardless of how you're doing your work. So let's, oh, sorry, was there a question there? No, just a bit of background. Okay. So we'll talk a little bit about the Agile enterprise. And I kind of just want to set the landscape for this. And this is an observation that I made, which I thought was really interesting. So the fundamental nature of how business operates has really dramatically shifted over the past few years. And we've globally reshaped how people do their jobs and how we manage people, and basically the way we show up day to day. In spite of that really significant shift in the landscape of hybrid and remote working, half of the headlines from Harvard Business Review over the past 2 years have all been focused not on that, but on what I consider to be agile behaviors and how we get those embedded in our organizations at scale. I accidentally clicked prematurely there, but here you go. Here are the key covers from the past few years. So we've got balancing efficiency and innovation, collaboration, experimentation, data-driven decision-making, embracing change, and the current issue that's out now is about focusing on people and not the work. And what I think this does is tells a really interesting story just about how much appetite there is for Agile at scale. And personally, I think this is going to continue to dominate the landscape of the transformation industry for probably the next decade. So if you're not familiar, now we'll take a quick look at what scaled Agile is. I'll just give you a quick overview. And I'm just going to start by saying the BA role is not covered here deliberately because I'm doing an abstract summary, and we're going to get into that detail in a few slides. But what I want to do is give a sort of a by the book foundation. So at the bottom down here, we've got our standard team, and they're working in sprints, or maybe they're using Kanban. They're producing some kind of forecast towards some type of milestone using burn-ups, other data tools, but essentially they're just rocking on as per the Scrum guide, sprint to sprint to sprint. So if we scale up a layer, we have this program layer or the team of teams layer. And here we've got multiple teams that are now grouped together working towards a common goal. And to make this work, we need a few extra ingredients. So we're going to have some extra roles that are going to help us coordinate. So something like a chief scrum master, a senior product owner, or a product manager. We also are going to forecast on a slightly longer time horizon. So you can see here when looking at, for argument's sake, 6 iterations or 6 sprints. Doesn't have to be that. That's going to vary from organization to organization. But we need some sort of planning event to facilitate that. So that's big room planning. Now, whether that's PI planning or if you're doing a weekly sync, less style or something like that, you need some coordination meeting between your Scrum teams and your Scrum masters so that you have that longer view and we can all collectively view our empirical data from multiple teams working on the same product. Now, if you're a bigger organization, you might be operating with the portfolio approach, and there you've got multiple teams of teams, so teams of teams of teams, and they might be working on separate products, or it might possibly be the same product. You might have hundreds and potentially thousands of people working on the same product. And when we're at this level, we focus less on individual features, and we're looking at bigger strategic pieces of work. So they might be, you might call those epics or strategic initiatives, capabilities, regardless of how you label it. We're focused less on the features that customers use, but instead we're looking more at our organization and how it's responding to the market. We're thinking less in a time horizon of months. We're thinking more in terms of quarters and years. And these bigger, expensive work items that are up here, so we manage those using lean business cases, moving through a portfolio Kanban board. We're going to come back to the portfolio Kanban later. But what you can see here is we still have backlogs at every level, and they will all link up hierarchically. So one of the 2 biggest pieces of feedback that we get from organizations that are about to go through a transformation or currently they're going through a transformation is from the people on the ground that are actually doing the work, is that they say that the business is lacking communication or vision or both. And it kind of makes sense for the 2 to go hand in hand, because if you don't know what the vision is, you don't really know how to communicate it correctly. And if you don't know how to communicate correctly, how are people supposed to know what the vision is or ask questions about it? So how do we solve that? Well, one of the most successful ways that we're seeing enterprises solve this is using lean portfolio management. And I'm not going to go very deep on lean portfolio management here because that's literally a 3-day course that I teach. And I don't want to make this talk overly specific about SAFe either. I'm only showing this slide from SAFe because amongst all the frameworks, they're really blazing a trail in actually documenting this kind of thing and making it accessible to people. So just broadly speaking, lean portfolio management consists of 3 topics that you can see in the blue triangles here. And that is essentially, what are we spending our money on? How are we making the things that we spend the money on? And is everybody playing by the rules of how we said we'd spend the money and how we said we'd build things? So what we've got here is a system of people trying to connect together the strategy, the vision, and communicate it to the people that are doing the work and make sure that it's all linked up, that we're following those hierarchies from the team up to the team of teams and up to the portfolio, the team of teams level. So I've thrown a lot of information at you. Hopefully it all makes sense, but you might be thinking, okay, how does this work? What does it have to do with me? Because this, this is BA/, it's not like governance or portfolio operations / bear with me, we're getting there. I just needed to lay a bit of groundwork. Okay, so the main tool that we use to drive all of this, as I mentioned, is a good old Kanban board. So at that portfolio level, the thing that is driving it, we manage it all through Kanban. And how that works at the portfolio level is all of our ideas are coming into the funnel on the left from multiple sources and in different degrees of quality and detail. So in the funnel, where we've got our epics or our strategic initiatives, we might have things like new business opportunities or cost-saving opportunities, maybe mergers and takeovers, as I have been through multiple times. Maybe we're looking at fixing some really big problems in our existing solutions. But that's where it all starts out. So for an epic to progress from that funnel into the review stage, it needs to have some type of an owner assigned to it. So that's usually a senior sponsor who is passionate about seeing this thing get implemented. So when one of those people is available, they will pick that up and ensure that it gets refined. In this review stage, it'll have a hypothesis created and attached to it. And usually we try and figure out some preliminary costs to work out, is it worth doing this thing? And is it worth doing it, picking it over something else? So when capacity allows, either from the team perspective, the business perspective, or if we have sufficient sponsors available, that epic will then get progressed through into the analysis phase. I'm showing my mouse here, but I've just realized you can't all see it. So then we move into the analysis phase over here. And when it's in the analysis phase, we apply much more scrutiny and we're adding a lot more detail. And this is where we start to build out our lean business cases. And there we are collecting all of the data, things like the leading indicators, more detailed cost. We'll go and get all of that, collate it in a lean business case, verify it, and turn that into sort of an outline of an MVP. And based on that, all of that information gathering and the content of that lean business case, we would usually have some sort of go or no-go decision with a collection of people. So that might be like your Agile PMO in conjunction with your business owners or your very senior stakeholders collectively saying, okay, we've got all these business cases, we can only fund X, or we only have capacity to do X. What do we progress? So from there, when it's given the hopefully green light, it will move into the portfolio backlog, and it will then get picked up and move into the implementation stage and eventually get set to done. And I'm really simplifying all that implementation bit. Obviously, that's very complex, and there's a whole load more going on here about pivot and persevere, all of the Eric Ries lean startup stuff, but that's beyond the scope of this talk. What I wanted to get across here is the importance of the epics and the lean business cases, because that's what is really important for that flow. For our strategic things to happen, the thing that we're working with, our currency, if you like, through the portfolio Kanban, is epics and lean business cases. So you start out with an epic and it evolves into the lean business case as we get further through the Kanban board. And as I mentioned, for it to get through that go or no-go decision point, we need a fair amount of good quality data, because these things are potentially millions of pounds of investment, and that's not something that should be undertaken lightly. Now, it's quite unlikely that our senior stakeholders that are owning these epics have the skills or the bandwidth to go and gather this data or analyze it and make sure that the value is there. So this is the first place where we see the classic business analyst role adding a lot of value in the Agile enterprise. So they might be working with the Agile PMO or with your senior product managers, that product management team, to refine and validate these business cases at the strategic level. Going out to the market or going out to all different areas of the business, gather this data, collect it, and make sure that what we know that we have a good idea that what we're trying to achieve is correct, and the kinds of data that will demonstrate success. So a good example here is, I know somebody who works on an engagement in the finance sector, and somebody said, right, we need to do this new product. The government have just said we can launch this new product, and if we do this, it's going to earn us £2 million in 3 months or 6 months, something like that, which seemed really, really good based on how much it would actually cost the organization to build. It was a massive, like a 10x return or something like that. And then they put some people on the analysis, and it turned out actually the data said it would only make them £200,000 in the first 6 months. and they would just about break even. So if they just taken that person at their word, they would have potentially spent a lot of money and seen not a lot of benefit and maybe even some losses. So that's position number one, where we see BAs, the classic business analyst, adding loads and loads of value, and that is up here in that portfolio Kanban in the analysis and the review stage. And the second place is down here at the team level. And there's a lot of confusion here, and we have a lot of conversations about, oh, well, if you have a BA embedded in a team or somebody who's specializing in business analysis, doesn't that just mean that you have a weak product owner? Shouldn't you just have better product owners, and then you wouldn't need to have that person? And the answer for me is sometimes yes. And you know what? That might actually be intentional. It might be that they've got some new product owners into the business and they are trying to upskill them, and so they're sort of supporting them with somebody else who has a lot of experience, maybe in requirements gathering in the skill set, or maybe just in that particular area of expertise. But there are some scenarios that we have found where it makes a lot of sense to permanently have a business analyst or somebody with that type of role permanently embedded in the team. So very recently, one of our consultants worked on an engagement with a large investment bank. And what they were doing there is they were building a new market risk platform. So the point of this system was to work out, when their bankers are doing trades, if they were to increase their leverage, or the amount of skin they've got in the game, how much did the risk increase? So if you're doing a trade with 10x leverage and you increase that to 11x leverage, does your risk increase proportionally by 10% or not? If it might double the risk for a huge amount of market factors. So the implication here is this system can run multiple scenarios and do something like a Monte Carlo analysis to work out the sweet spot of how much money can you put into a trade, how much can you leverage yourself, and also find that sweet spot where there is the least amount of risk possible. And then it can feed that back to the trader and say, oh, actually, if you just put in maybe 0.4% less, you will end up with a 5% risk reduction because of XYZ factors. So that bit's not relevant. Just wanted to give you a bit of context. The first step in this journey was to rebuild that legacy system using the new technologies. And these trades are in the millions and millions of pounds. So all the calculations that were made by this system, the new system, needed to be absolutely bang on. They needed to match the old system exactly to the penny. So that means that somebody had the, in my opinion, not very enviable job of unpicking all of those old calculations in that legacy system that's written 20 years ago or something like that, unpicking all of that, turning it into sets of data that can be easily understood and rewritten as value-centric stories by the product owner. Now, originally these teams did have 2 BAs per team. They ended up moving to just the 1 and figured out this custom way of working where the role of the business analyst there was to do the research, analyze the data, and distill very, very complex amounts of business logic, and then work closely with the product owner to turn that into something useful and more understandable to the everyday human. And that's the pattern that we've seen repeat at quite a few of our clients. Usually where they're working with very complex bits of business logic, and the sheer amount of detail means that regardless of the competency of who's in that team, if it fell to one person, they wouldn't be able to make themselves accessible to the team on a daily basis. And if you know your Scrum guide, you'll know that for Agile to work well, you should have a business representative available to the team on a daily basis, working with the team, and that's usually the product owner. But the amount of complexity here means that person would never get their head out of the data, would never switch off Excel enough to actually talk to the team. So that's where they found this nice balance of somebody mostly in the detail and somebody mostly taking that detail and turning it into these user stories. So that's just a bit of a case study in where that's worked really well. So just to recap, primarily, it's not about the labels. It's about the skill set. Okay, and you guys have done a really great job of outlining those skills. If you're wondering where does the specific classical role of a business analyst sit, we tend to see them go up to that portfolio level at the top, or they get down into the details and they are permanently embedded in teams. And that is us in a nutshell. All done. So I think I've seen a couple of questions pop in the chat.
So we've had a question come through, which is really like a great question, which is from Alvin, which is it possible for a BA to switch into a product owner role, and what skills will be required? What type of tools should they master?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And it comes up very, very often. And a lot of the time when organizations are going through transformations, that's something that we'll recommend, is to say that business analyst, they will make a really, really great product owner. And a lot of the time, it is being able to do, from a skills perspective, it's being able to look at all the detail, do all of the analysis, and then translate that into user stories that focus less on the how and more on the what. So if we switch back to our skills bit that we did at the start, you'll see on there we have some really, really great ones, which were, where is it now? Storytelling. That's a really, really key mindset switch for people moving into the product owner role and away from a purist BA role. Is we want to take our developers on the journey. We want to give them the context of here's why we're doing this thing, and then we let them figure out the detail. And if they need to come to us and ask some questions, a clarification point about something, that's cool. We're there to answer. But what's really powerful is if we can set the vision for them, set the end journey, and just help guide them towards the destination. And communication is a really key one there as well, because obviously you need to be able to communicate that story well.
So for me, Graham, I mean, very much that whole conversation, and when I first came across SAFe and looked at my sort of certifications, that conversation about BAs don't exist in this landscape, and well, that's what I've done, and that's who I am. What am I going to be now? But it was this sort of like, you perhaps act as a pseudo product owner, but there are certainly a different set of skills. It's not just having your traditional BA skills. That much I did get. You can't just go, right, this is what I did, now I'm a product owner. There is an identification of skills, and those skills that allow you to be that product owner in the Agile space.
Yeah, and a lot of that I think is about the mindset. A lot of the skills are 100% reusable, but the mindset needs to change so that we switch into servant leader mode, and we're figuring out what do we need to supply the team so that they can do all of the creative problem solving, and what information do we need? How do we find that balance where we give them just enough information that they can solve the problem, but we're not telling them the exact solution and the spec of what to build, because then we box them in and reduce their ability to creatively problem solve. Awesome. Okay, anybody else got any questions?
Yes, I do, Graham. Thank you very much for presenting. I do have 2 questions. So I think one would be around the slide that you have put on. That's the simple scaled view overview.
Yeah.
I think it's really good that you lay out there are kind of 3 levels, like portfolio, program, and team, and you have identified the skills of BA, like the business and analysis skills can be applied on in the portfolio layer as well as the team layer. And it would be good to pick your brain, do you think there's anything that you think business analysis skills would be helpful in the middle layer as well? Because I think every now and often I would hear there will be quite a lot of coordination work at the program level, and I wonder whether you see kind of that's where the kind of the business analysis skills would play in quite well. So that's the first question. The other question is about how you see the future of Agile, i.e., do you think there's any elements in Agile, like in terms of approach, methodologies, that they are evolving, or you just see that actually we are still using the same methodology, or the approach is more about organizations are adopting them, like they are using them like quite differently, or they are doing more? So just want you to get your view as well.
Okay, yeah. So the first question that you asked, in this middle layer, so we have these big room planning events. They are absolutely critical for the successful implementation of Scrum at scale, Agile at scale. You need somebody who can facilitate large groups of people, who can coordinate, and often that person needs to have quite a good understanding of the whole system, because they need to be able to see all of the components or all of the teams in the system and kind of coach people towards thinking, okay, if we change something over here, is that going to impact things over here? And so the facilitation skills are absolutely key. The communication skills are absolutely key, because you're working with all different levels of stakeholders and all types of personalities and interests. But having a really, really good technical understanding of the system as well is really, really helpful. So you would find at this program level, people would tend to focus in. If we look at our big bubble of skills, they'll tend to focus more on a group of skills. So if you're like a release train engineer, chief scrum master type person, you're going to focus more on facilitation, coordination, empathy, and planning, and maybe less in the detail. If you're like a product manager person, then you're going to be looking more at the system and the storytelling and communicating the vision. Your second question about where do I think Agile is going, I think we will, the rate of change in technology is just going to accelerate from this point, and DevOps is becoming more embedded as culture. And that means that our time horizons are going to get shorter and shorter and shorter. And so you've got organizations like Tesla that are doing 1 day or half-day sprints. And, they just turn things around incredibly quickly. And I think that will happen to most industries. I think we might see a move away from the longer time horizon, maybe the 3 or the 6 month plans. And over time, those will get shorter and shorter. Maybe we're looking at 2 months, and then it's a month, and then it's 2 weeks. And that won't happen overnight, because a lot of these industries that we're in, especially the bigger ones, are quite compliance driven, and so they need some element of long-term forecasting. But eventually that will change, and the regulators will catch up, and the disruptors will come into the marketplace. And I think over the next 10 years we will see a shift towards more, I would say, Kanban-y types of ways of working. Hamoon, you asked how deep or how much do you need to know coding? Well, I've been doing this for about 15 years, and I don't know how to code. I've tried to learn probably 5 times, because I thought that would be a useful skill for someone in my profession. No, I can do a great little batch file, maybe, if that's what you need, or like a smattering of PowerShell. I have no skill beyond that. So, a lot of it is about being able to problem solve and work with people. That's the most important thing. Don't underestimate the human element of this.
So we had a question from Alvin as well, which is the product owner still doing the analysis work under a safe LES framework?
Yep. So I don't know if I can't speak too much about less because that's not one of my, I don't know it deep enough to answer that question for you. I would say in SAFE, we have the product owner and the product manager. And so for the product owner, they would be 70% focused on the team and on the analysis and 30% on the customer and on the market. And the product manager is the inverse of that. So they are largely focused on the market and figuring out what the market wants through conversation, and 30% on the kind of the detail and the analysis. So yes, the product owner is still doing a lot of analysis in the SAFE framework, but what they're looking to do there is validate that the value is there and that they're building the right thing, and they're not worrying about how it gets built.
I think one of the things, Graham, is where are you up with purist first? You know, I mean, you said at the beginning about actually what happens in an organization, then maturity, and we could probably have a whole different presentation on that.
Yeah.
But, you know, if we sort of say, if we go back to our skills, are business analysts required, or that, you know, if we say there's no role for them in an agile framework, but actually they're probably the most versatile resources, as long as and it's the skill, isn't it? I suppose it's the skill base that you need, but being able to kind of move right from supporting sort of testers right at the beginning or right through to the end, or being proxy product owners, but sort of looking at a flow of a process, as opposed to just looking at it sort of in isolation.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is so much of this comes down to the soft skills, and it's, I think a great business analyst is really, really good at that human element, the soft skills. And a lot of the time when you ask people for what they want, what they actually want, what they need is very, very different, because people have a tendency to solutionize, and they'll say, I need it to do these things, rather than telling you what the problem is that they're trying to solve. So if you can tease that out of them and elicit that, what actually is the problem we're trying to solve, and we'll worry about how we solve the problem, that's really, really powerful. And that's useful at every stage of your career, regardless of what your role is. And just being able to work with the people to figure that out. And then on the back end, turn it into the technical, the well-written, the detailed requirements that everybody needs.
Thanks.
Cool. All right. So any more questions? Any more?
Not any more questions. Just asking everybody to provide their feedback back on Menti again. How you found the presentation, any sort of questions that you might sort of still need answering, or anything else like that. Please do share. We're a collaborative community here.
Yeah, this feedback's really, really useful for me. And I'll also add, if anybody wants to find me on LinkedIn, I think I'm linked in the /VA/post. So do connect with me or follow me.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I'll also plug in the promotion of the next event. The next one is going to be at the end of this month, the 30th. And we have a very long-term community member who will be sharing her experience on how to measure values of projects. I think as business analysts, and sometimes as product owners, product managers, one of the biggest problems, and sometimes we sort of just put it under the carpet, is that we work very hard to deliver the features or the functions of digital products or whatever products that you're building or services that you're building. But when it comes to measuring the values, or like really seeing whether we are realizing the benefits as we said we would at the start of the project, that becomes very tricky. And like people don't tend to talk about it, because they just get to a mind space that, oh, actually not sure whether that should, like, whether that would impact anything about the project, or whether there's any resources, people doing that work. So it's going to be a very interesting sharing from her first-hand experience of using kind of a tester approach to see how benefits are delivered on a project or on a product. So watch this space. We'll launch the registration on Eventbrite very soon, sometime towards the end of this week or next. So looking forward to seeing you again at the end of November. Meanwhile, anyone for any more questions to Graham, or otherwise we'll just start the networking section. Just everyone can turn on the camera and we get to know one another as well. It's good. So yeah, so thank you very much for joining, and especially Graham, thank you very much for taking the time to pull all these together to share your views as well as the discussion that you had internally around this topic. As Pam said, it's really close to heart, and it's good to see lots of people are thinking about how they can use their skills in other contexts, and also to be equipped for the evolving market, like how organizations or have skill sets are changing on different projects and products. So thank you. And yeah,
pleasure.
Let's meet again at another event, and we'll see you there. Have a very good morning, afternoon, and evening. See you next time. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Thanks all.
Thank you.